Social media platforms, the hashtag is the morning drift on this 1st of May 2023. My name is Elijah Charles Kiage. Welcome back to our big conversation this morning. I know it's Labor Day, and today we should be focusing on exactly what is happening around labor issues in the country. But we do promise we're going to get there even as we wait for events to take shape at Uhuru Gardens, where we do expect that ceremony to actually start. But in the studio this morning, just to look at exactly what is happening in other spheres of the economy, even as we wait for us to start talking about labor issues in the country. Peter Macharia, who is a human rights lawyer. Mr. Macharia, how are you doing? Fantastic. Here's the thing. There's a lot that is happening in the country, and we can't close our eyes to the fact that Kenya currently is dealing with a lot of issues. Here's the thing. I want us to pick on the first one this morning that we did iron out in as much as what is happening in the country. Tomorrow, even as the president is going to join the country in celebrating Labor Day, but we're going to get a lot of promises, probably. We do know that there's a huge part of the country that is disgruntled with what they're saying is the cost of living, opening of the IEBC servers, and stopping the reconstitution of IEBC. Talking about the Azimio threat to go back to the streets tomorrow. And we do know that in one way or another, maybe the president might speak to it today. When you look at his reaction yesterday, and he did speak actually this weekend, and he did speak on it, is that I do not understand exactly what you guys are doing. And for the very first time, I'm going to show you then that I'm the chief commander of the armed forces in the country. For the very first time, Ruto came out, spoke. You can actually see his emotions on this particular issue. What do you think triggered the president to speak like that?
So, of course, the president is still a politician.
Yes.
And politicians, at times they want or they intend to speak to the issues affecting people or the issues that the people they are serving would like to hear.
Yes.
So the president, and when, I listened to that clip, and when he said, I'm the commander-in-chief, there was uproar. Everyone was happy. So I think that is what people wanted to hear as a thing. But then we have to understand, we have to contextualize, to problematize, and to have it, to understand what does it really mean.
Yeah.
And you see, that cannot be understood in isolation of the issues raised by the other part of the population. Because we understand the Constitution allows people to picket, to demonstrate, to raise issues to the public office. As at now, as you are speaking, the public office holders are the president and his team. And it cannot be hard. The president is threatening. Of course, the bottom line is no one is allowed by law to destroy other people's property, to kill, to maim, to injure, to hurt in any way. But then the government is supposed to offer an environment where everyone can exercise their rights, whether they are against the government, whether they are against any other individual. And the work of the police is to ensure there is security. If there is anyone who is stealing, who is killing, who is injuring, that person should be arrested and taken to court.
Yes.
But then the police ought not to be used by one divide of the politics to disperse unreasonably those who are participating in addressing issues. So I think the president spoke from a point of anger, from a point of a frustration. Because we understand, when he says that we are not going to allow, we need to look at what are the repercussions of these demonstrations. One, when there are demonstrations, most of the businesses in Nairobi, they don't operate. People don't go to work. What is the effect of that? The government does not get revenue. People do not work. They can't be paid. Because today being a Labor Day, we will go and discuss. You can't be paid because when you have not worked and you can't demand for it.
Yes.
Now, when there are such demonstrations, and then his utterances also are linked to the previous invitation sent to the Azimio team that they ought to discuss. But then I think and I feel when you invite somebody for a discussion, inviting them is not enough. Even your conduct past the invitation are also important. Because let all people come on the table without chance thumping, without cartwheeling on what they want.
Yes.
Let everyone come on the table. They table their issues. What can be agreed, be agreed. What can be done, be done. What cannot be done, say it not to be done. But then you can't come to a discussion with a fixed mindset. On the other side, you can't tell me I'm not going to exercise my constitutional right because
yes,
you are the head of the state.
Here's the thing. Is this right measured? When we're looking at this, the right to picket, demonstrate, assemble, as a Kenyan citizen, is it an absolute right? Or are we going to look back and say, but all these demonstrations you've had in this country, they've never been safe. We're looking at you now, single-handedly, as Mr. Macharia, that every time you go to the street, you're either destroying property, you're either banning other people's businesses, you're stopping the normal operation of the economy. So on that particular note, now that's what the police commander said yesterday. You listen to him and say, well, we didn't receive your notice in good time. We might not have enough police presence in the city today, going by, number one, the history of your demonstrations, to actually protect the same people who are demonstrating and the businesses of Kenyans at these areas you want to go demonstrate at. Is it a measured right? Or are we saying, as long as you're supposed to demonstrate, go to the street?
The manner of demonstration envisioned by our constitution,
yes,
is that you are not armed. You're not armed. But then when you are armed as a demonstrator, that changes the dynamics and the language changes. Because the police, the work of the police is to protect. What are they protecting? They are protecting the life of those who are demonstrating, those who are not demonstrating, the property of those who are not demonstrating. But then when you are armed, that changes the narrative. So I think, and that then may inform the reasons why the police boss is telling them, I mean, this cannot happen because of this. But nothing can fetter the constitutional rights. Nothing can fetter it. What they ought to do, if they want to be successful in their demonstrations, let them tell their members, please don't get armed. Don't cause unnecessary attention. Don't disrupt the normal operations of because if you affect the operations, then the government ought to intervene.
Yes.
And that's where maybe we do not understand, or we misunderstand, or we want to misunderstand it. But essentially, the constitutional protection of demonstration is that people are not armed. They are presenting their issues to a public office. They are presenting the issues to a public officer. At that point, the police ought even not to throw tear gas canisters to them. You know, what then brings apprehension, we have seen in the past, some tear gas canisters are even thrown in a house where a kid is sleeping. And then you ask yourself, is the kid armed? Are those female armed? So I think either side ought to have what we call internal and personal restraint.
Yes.
Because in human rights we say, where your right ends, my right starts. Where my right ends, yours start. So if your right is to demonstrate, when you have a weapon, that's where my right to protect other citizens starts.
Yes.
So people ought to understand, and we Kenyans also to understand that even when we have rights, some of them are not absolute. That I have right to demonstrate. I cannot come here in studio and start destroying items belonging to this news house. I cannot start pelleting stones on innocent motorists or those who are people are going about their businesses. I cannot start burning tires.
True.
So that comes from the appreciation of that. Everyone has a right. Those who are demonstrating, they have a right. Those who are protecting, they have a right. So what needs to happen is a balancing of this right. But then it can't be correct that one side of the society is saying you cannot demonstrate. That can't be the position. That is not the spirit of the Constitution. Everyone has a right. And unless you have a justification to limit that right, that is when you're allowed to act on it.
That's it.
No one can go to court today to say that these people are demonstrating. They should be stopped. You need to have reasons why you want them stopped. If they are coming to demonstration with weapons, what you ought maybe to stop is them coming with the weapons, but not demonstrating. It's a right protected by the Constitution.
Yes.
That right ought also to be understood parallel to the right of speech. Anyone has the right to speak about what they want to speak about. But then it has a limit. You cannot defame someone in the process of expressing yourself. Yeah? You can't harm someone's reputation in the spirit of you expressing yourself. So these things have limits. Some rights are absolute, some are not. But the genesis and understanding of rights is that where your right starts, mine end. Where your right end, mine start.
Pretty much.
Yes.
So let's look at the cards on the table now. Because if you look at the issues that have been fronted by them, one of them stands out up there as a Kenyan issue that has been represented to the President of the Republic of the country, was William Samoei Ruto, that the cost of living is quite high. And that's why we are in the street. And by the way, all of a sudden now, there's a conversation of the UNGA conversation in the cost of living. The Azimio coalition has looked at it and said, we were not talking about UNGA, even from the beginning or the onset of our demands. We're talking about the general cost of living. And the president is quite cognizant of the fact that indeed the cost of living is high. But we are trying to do something to bring it down in the long term. This particular one, is it reason enough for the Azimio coalition to go to the street? And do you think that if indeed these discussions on the bipartisan committee are going to begin, that it is going to hold water? Because, Mr. Macharia, let's look back. I mean, even from the time that President Dr. William Ruto came on board, he came in with promises to tackle the cost of living in this country. That was way big in his point agenda, in his acceptance or promulgation speech. How is it that now it is still a factor that is taking the Azimio coalition to the street? And do you think that the current government is actually doing something to reduce the cost of living?
One of the issues about the cost of living, and I think is very pertinent issue, that all the sectors of the government ought to have a way out of it. When you talk about the cost of living, we are not talking about only the cost of UNGA. Look at fuel. It's so up there. Look at the other basic commodities. They are up there. And then we ask ourselves, the role of the government. The role of the government, government has several roles. One, it is to ensure that there is an enabling environment for people to trade.
Yes.
Then the government ought to also aid in the protection of rights. The government also is supposed to have, to allow, by and large, is to allow the people to have their life continue without much interferences. And you know, the government can do something about the cost of living. It can do something. Why am I saying that? Because when you look at the factors that, or the influencers on the item cost, the unit cost of an item, there is the part of the government, there is the part of the cost that goes to the government as a tax. And if we look back, when COVID hit, what did the government do? One, it reduced the amount of taxes people ought to pay. And also, it also introduced subsidies on some of the items, just to caution people against the hardship of COVID-19. As well, I think this government is doing something, but then we need to ask ourselves, is it sufficient to take us to the next level?
Yes.
This government was clear that it cannot subsidize consumption. It can only subsidize production. Mm-hmm. Then let's ask ourselves, you cannot work on an empty stomach. The workers we are talking about, their rights today, they cannot go to work on an empty stomach. That now they have planted their seeds. They are just happy and going to work. How will they work?
Important question, isn't it? Mr. Macharia, I want you to hold your thought there, because that conversation is exactly what takes us into the second part of our conversation this morning, because there is a lot that is going on in the country currently. By the way, former retired President Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta is back within Jubilee politics. You did see exactly what happened last week. Again, now the government is quite serious about regulation of churches in the country. Speaks on something like, what is my right as a Kenyan citizen as well? Can I choose to die if I am an adult? Can the government stop me from dying? Again, as we're talking about human rights right here on Lookuptv. Remember, the hashtag is The Morning Drift, online at Lookuptv, across all your social media platforms. We come back, continue with the same conversation with Mr. Macharia right here as we look at exactly what is going on in the country. Even as today, we get ready to hear from our president on his first Madaraka Day celebrations. What does he have for us? It's a day when he's going to talk about Labor Day. Wow. Labor Day. Why am I talking about Madaraka Day? Labor Day celebrations. It's a day when we are going to look at the promises that we're gonna hear from the government. Maybe something up the sleeve for him, maybe to lessen this heavy burden of the cost of living on Kenyan employees. Once we come back right here on The Morning Drift, the conversation continues.
Karibu sana mpenzi mtazamaji. Leo ninakualika kwenye mkahawa wa Epitome Zinc, Tsavo Road, lililoko jijini Nairobi.
Ukiingia ndani utahudumiwa kwa haraka, na chakula yetu ni moto. Chakula yetu, service yetu iko very excellent. Tumebebea.
Hapa kazi tu yo yo. Yeah, hapa kazi.
Mpenzi mtazamaji, na hakika kwamba wewe umekula kwa macho. Na hii ni hapa kazi tu.
Beautiful, wonderful, glorious. We are having the show that we share entitled Shepherd Voice.
I'm waiting for you to get me to Kenya. That's what I'm waiting
for you.
God is the source of every blessings that flow into your life.
And I know that God is going to bless you and to do a new thing.
Pray. Pray. Utachagua sura au tabia unapotaka kumchumbia mwanamke?
Anaweza kuwa mrembo lakini hana tabia.
Naweza jifanya ndio hata kama hapa sitapata, nipate kwa tabia.
Ukweli wa mambo ni kwamba wanaume wengi, hata wale ambao wanatutazama wakati huu, ni sura inawavutia mara ya kwanza.
Ukiona mwanaume anasema ule dem ako poa, ule dem, hafikirii future na huyo dem. Huyo mwenye ako poa anapendeza, anakaa vizuri,
acha kutudanganya.
Wajua waweza kuwa na tabia nzuri lakini ikabadilishwa na hali. Kanisani wanja ndugu yangu waimba kwaya, wakishuka wakipanga masika, na hao ndugu hawachukui.
Lazima nikae na wewe kwa muda fulani. Nikusome, nikujue kindani sana.
Kuna uchunguzi wa aina mbili ndugu yangu, kuna uchunguzi wa polisi na wa CID. Kama kuna mtu ambaye ana ujuzi wa hali ya juu ya kujifanya na kukusoma akili yako na kukufanya wewe uamini kile unachotaka kutoka kwake, ni mwanamke.
Usiwahi cheza na mboga yangu. Na unafuata nani? Usisikuone ukinifuata. Nimekwambia una shares kwa hii kuku.
Look, man. Hebu kwanza rudi ndani ufresh hiyo choo na make sure umespray.
Juli, kwani wewe hii tumbo yako mimi najua inaweza ingiza kila kitu. Hata chuma nikishiaga nikupea, hata plastic najua utakula. Kwani leo kunaendaje? Kuna kitu sielewi.
Kabisa Mluya. Yaani umeamua kulala uchi.
Sasa kama hakuna ile nguo inanitosha, unataka nifanye aje?
Because you are fat.
Sasa ukiongelea mimi ati fat, na Julie tutasemaje?
Kuja.
Are you a junior secondary school, a college, a TVET institution or a university and you want to advertise your intake? Book now and advertise with us today on both Lookuptv and all our digital platforms. Call us today on 011 0430 158, 011 0430 158 or email us on sales@lookuptv.co.ke.
Welcome back to the Morning Drift. Coming up right here on this 1st of May 2023 is a conversation with Ian Keitani with Gabriel NYAMU, who's a HR consultant. It's going to look into issues, employee affairs, exactly how you should identify what should be and should not be at your workplace day. Quite a very interesting conversation to look into that, but we're still here with Mr. Macharia. I want us to close on our conversation for the Azimio threat to go to the streets just before we look at other issues. And you were just finalizing on this particular area for the cost of living. What can the current government do, at least?
I think, and I really appreciate the fact that the subsidizing of production, it's an excellent idea.
Yes.
But that ought to be the long-term idea. So the government is planning, we do not plant today and harvest tomorrow. It takes time, a number of months. So I wish the government can have a balance, say, though our policy is determined on subsidizing production, because also consumption is important, and you cannot work on an empty stomach.
Yes.
Let us subsidize consumption a little bit, so that at least you can be able to afford something. Yes, it can be different from what the previous government had, but then I believe it's not something out that is not doable. So that even those who are working on the farms, they have something in their stomach.
Yes.
So that in the long run, you will cut the subsidy on the production, because the food in the market is plenty. Alternatively, you make policies or plans on how food can be brought in the market, so that even as we wait for ours to mature and for us to harvest, there is food in the market. You either subsidize the product that's there, or you bring something new that has favorable terms to the mwananchi, so that even as they wait for theirs to mature, they have something in their stomach to work with.
Yes.
Yes, and I think because assuming we do not eat, we will die before even our crops mature. Of what benefit will it be to us and to the government when the people who were given fertilizer, who were given seeds, they are not there to enjoy those fruits? So I think the governments need to find a balance. And I think it's possible. You either bring food that is affordable to mwananchi with the little they are getting, or you subsidize what is in the market so that they can afford it. And also, you see, previously when the government came in the office, there was not much rain. Now there is a lot of rains. What is the government's policy on harvesting that rainwater? So that water, you know, one of the reasons why when hunger strikes, it strikes hard, because we do not have other means of production. We rely on the natural source of water. If the governments, you know, there are some areas that are conspicuous with floods and whatnot. Can the government teach or have framework on how people can harvest water and how they can utilize it to their production? So that now that there are rains, the efforts should be on the consumption and harvesting of water. When this rain will end, that water will be used to water plants that are there.
Yes.
So that ultimately the production will be good. But the floods are there, they are killing everyone, they are killing animals. So that then at the end of the day we'll say government's idea, Serikali's idea, because people are dead because of the floods. The crops in the farms have been taken by the rains. I am a farmer and I know if there is so much rain, even the manure you have put, it will be carried away. The produce you want to harvest, it will not be yield much because it has been affected.
Yes.
And I think if the government want to help people and to get a permanent solution to the issue of food, diversifying the manner of food production is very important, so that we do not just keep on subsidizing consumption.
Pretty much.
I agree, it is a big expense on our government, but then in the long run, let the government come up with plans, sustainable plans. If you teach farmers on how to harvest rain and how to farm using other avenues of water, they will not need you to subsidize their consumption because they'll be able to manage themselves.
Yes.
Recently, there was a discussion about introduction of genetically modified crops. You know, for them, they take a shorter duration. So if the government can seal all the loops in terms of the health benefits and the health hazards, so that, and then there is a good policy framework on who is to supply them, how is supply to be done, so that then we shall not allow the production of those food crops and then we start battling our health hazards. If that's a framework that can be brought as well, it's fine, because you see, those are they are modified to yield much and also in a short duration.
Yes.
So that ultimately we'll say we have a proper supply of food. And when food is in the market, when there is supply, demand goes down and the price goes down, so that then even the government can be able to concentrate on other activities other than the cost of living.
Pretty much. All right, let's quickly move into the next discussion that has whipped the country. Former President Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta has been quite silent on local matters. We've seen him in the region really leading peace conversations. He came back, and this is why he came back. There have been some wrangles within Jubilee. Came to look into it, and that got the government talking, and some members of the Kenya Kwanza government talking, saying, why is this man back in active politics? He should be already resting. It's the conversations of whether he should have or should have not actually appeared at Jubilee headquarters, just to look into why there were wrangles within that party. Let me first ask that question. Should he actively involve himself in Jubilee affairs, or just leave it for the guys who are looking to go into politics in the next round?
So Jubilee is President Uhuru's house. There's so many happenings in Jubilee. They are like poking fingers into his nose. I mean, as a Kenyan, what do you expect him to do? You come to his house, you steal his seat, you break his cup, you break the plates. You are drumming sufuria with spoons. What do you expect me to do? And I think as a Kenyan, we ought not to forget that the president is a Kenyan. He's a citizen of this republic. And the law protects citizens above all other individuals. Actually, the right and the powers belongs to the people of Kenya. And he's a Kenyan. So, that Kenyan has various spheres, the main three prongs of rights.
Yes.
The political rights, economic and social rights. President is a person who has political ambitions. He has a right to associate with whoever he wants to associate with. He has a right to attend any political gathering that concerns him. Jubilee is his party. If there are wrangles in his party, do we expect him to sit back? And actually, you know, we Kenyans are just very, very funny at times. When he acts, we say, why is he acting? When he's silent, we ask, this guy slept, why is he not even talking? So I think he's protecting his rights. That is his party. These discussions, these up and downs, wrangles, he's the person who ought to sit the various rifts together and tell them, this is our party, let us have a discussion. So I think it is in his right frame of position for him to attend to his issues. Equally, if people goes to his house and steal his sheep, destroy the fence, do we expect him to just sit back and watch? As a Kenyan, we expect him to act, to seek protection. Yeah. So we should not politicize some of the personal rights that individuals have. If today I speak of my threat to life, no one should politicize that. Because the right to life, protection of property is a constitutional right. Yes, we may have previous differences politically, but that does not mean I'm no longer a human being. So I think the president is right in what he's doing. Those who are saying, they are right in what they are saying. Yeah. Only that, they should know that their address as to the president's involvement should go to the limit as to where his involvement is affecting their lives. He's protecting his party. Those people who are talking about him, they are in their party. If their party was attacked, they'll be the first to react. And it is a human and natural reaction. So the president, I think he's right in what he's doing.
Yes.
And I think he is even empowered to do even much.
Yes. Let's move on to the next one now. It's a story that maybe we did know it, but now it's come to the fore because we started seeing a lot of bodies that are coming from the Shakahola massacre story. In fact, it started with what? 10, 5, all the way now to 100 plus. Let's begin like this. I mean, the Constitution recognizes religion, that Kenya is a secular nation. You can do whatever it is that you want, in as much as religion is concerned. That's a right you enjoy in this country. When we have deaths out of religion, and a priest stands up to explain it, Macharia, and says, that's the practice of our religion. We do not force anybody to come here. All the guys who've passed on, they passed on while practicing religion. We were fasting. Well, it is an essentially recognized story or practice within the Bible and other religious quarters. Can we start to regulate churches now? But even as Dr. President William Ruto forms a commission that's going to come up with a framework to regulate churches, what are these points that we need to regulate churches on, Macharia, so that we do not also start saying, well, in Kenya, your right to religion, it's measured.
Now, in jurisprudence,
yes,
or that is when we understand the history and the rationale why government exists. Previously, the understanding is people by themselves, they cannot understand even what is best for them.
As the Constitution says the people can understand what is best for them.
No, I'm saying,
yes,
in the frame and in the process,
yes,
of the genesis of the government, and the role the government plays. One of the argument is people in their state of nature
do not know what's good for them.
They are brutish,
yeah,
they are nasty,
yeah,
they are killing each other.
Yeah.
And that's why they decide, let us have a government that is going
them
to regulate our conduct.
Yes.
The other trail of thought about the role of the government is that people in their nature, in the doing of their business, they need to be protected, or the government needs to be in place so that it can adjudicate the disputes that arises out of the exercise of rights. So in those two main theories as to why the government exists, I will go by the first one, where by nature, people are just brutish. They are just very hostile to each other. And the government then needs to come to be able to protect and to regulate the extent by which people are interacting. So, when the government, one of the role of the government is to protect life. And the protection of life extends to harm yourself. The government has a right to protect you from harming yourself. A good case point is, it is an offense to attempt to commit suicide.
If you don't die, you have a case to answer.
Yes, it's an offense in law. Because you want to harm yourself, it's an offense in law. The government is trying to protect you. The reason, also, another example, it's an offense to drive carelessly and exceeding the limit. Maybe your car you can drive at very high speed.
Yes.
But the government says it limits the speed at which you can drive.
Yes.
It is protecting you from harming yourself.
Yes. On the basis of religion.
Yes, I'm coming there.
Yes, yes.
Then, and you see, the understanding on how the religious practices are done, when you understand, when you fully understand, is that the people who are doing these things to themselves, some seem as if they are induced with something that deletes their rationality. When somebody says, my pastor told me to fast until I die, I should not eat. I mean, that is a person now who needs to be interrogated so that, and the governments need to understand what is this that people are being taught, that it deletes their evolution,
yes,
their rational being. The government fights terrorism. You know how terrorism starts? These people are taught about so much about their religion, yes, to an extent that there is what we call jihads. They are taught that if you die protecting your religion, you are safe. So the government comes into place to even regulate the manner in which these people are conducting themselves, their businesses, so that they may not teach people, yes, on how to harm themselves.
On the basis of pure religion, Mr.
Yes.
Macharia, on the basis of pure religion, you and I don't have to go very far. I mean, we have stories in the Bible where there are 40 days and nights of fasting. Is that a crime to try and tell your congregates that let's try 40 days and nights of fasting? And when you're trying to regulate that, are you saying, well, change the Bible? The Bible is cheating you then.
But then, just to use the example you've given,
yes,
how many people died because of the 40 days fasting? Do you know of any in the Bible?
Mm.
Then, how comes you're fasting and you're dying? That is not biblical. How many people in the Bible fasted and died that we know of, that we read about? None. So then the government, we need to ask ourselves, is it the really fasting as the Bible says? The manner, the acts of the religious activities you're carrying out,
yes,
are they really in consonance with the Bible? We need to understand what gives you authority to teach people such stuff, such hard stuff that they can even deny their children food. Some even go to the extent of refusing to go to hospital, refusing to take their children to school. Where in the Bible did we read that?
Isn't there stories in the Bible? The Bible is full of miracles that were done by one man called Jesus Christ.
This Jesus Christ we're talking about, yes, also recognizes the role of the government. He says, give Caesar what belongs to them.
Mm-hmm.
That is the government. When Jesus was taken for crucifixion, it is the government that was crucifying him. Jesus had power to refuse to be crucified. He had power to vanish from the crucifixion point. But then, being the role of the government, Jesus went for the baptism that he went for. It was there he went.
Yes.
Jesus obeyed the law of the land. The Bible recognizes several instances where, like, when we talk about respecting the leadership, and the leaders comes from God, like David.
Yes.
David was a king installed by God in a political position. The only time that, you cannot be allowed by any way to take another person's life, either directly or indirectly. And that's why the Bible recognizes the role of the government. The Bible does not encourage teaching of people on how to harm themselves. That is not love. I don't think that is love. And I think the greatest commandment of all is love. The person who is telling you to fast until you die, he is still surviving and very strong. Is that love?
Is that, well, you have a president who actually, you can call Kenya a Christian nation because we know more than 80% of the Kenyan population, yes, actually are Christians. Is it going to be very hard for you now to start saying, okay, let's regulate these churches? On what basis? Just quickly in 2 minutes, now, so we can look at it. Yeah.
One, in terms of religion, it's who is doing these things.
Yes.
The person engaging in the teachings. What is their basis? Just like schools, people are taught things in school. We have regulation for teachers, the syllabus, and of course they have also to regulate what are the conducts done to minimize the cultism being practiced. So the regulation will go to the extent that that which you are teaching should not delete the rationale of that human being.
Yes.
And you should not induce them to deal in a manner that is inflicting pain upon themselves.
Yes.
That also extend. And actually we are talking about today is Labor Day. And you see, employer cannot induce employees to an extent that they cannot rationally decide what is best for them. You cannot. That's undue influence. And it is not allowed.
Pretty much. Mr. Macharia, I'll be calling you back again because there's a case that's going on. The courts are looking into it. We're going to wait and see the summary of these cases. And then after that, that commission definitely is going to come up with regulations. I'll call you back again so we look at them.
Yes.
We've seen Rwanda do the same thing. And President Kagame did say, look here, Rwanda is a blessed country. I do not think we need to get more blessings as well. But here's the thing. Mr. Macharia will be right here again shortly. But now, here's the thing. Ian Kitani is coming back for that conversation on what should be and should not be happening at the workplace then, in as much as your employee concerns are concerned. Coming up next right here on The Morning Drift on this 1st of May 2023, or Labor Day. Good morning.
Utachagua sura au tabia unapotaka kumchumbia mwanamke?
Anaweza kuwa mrembo lakini hana tabia.
Naweza jifanya ndio hata kama hapa sitapata, nipate kwa tabia.
Ukweli wa mambo ni kwamba wanaume wengi, hata wale ambao wanatutazama wakati huu, ni sura inawavutia mara ya kwanza.
Ukiona mwanaume anasema ule dem ako poa, ule dem, hafikirii future na huyo dem. Huyo mwenye ako poa anapendeza, anakaa vizuri,
acha kutudanganya.
Wajua waweza kuwa na tabia nzuri lakini ikabadilishwa na hali. Kanisani wanja ndugu yangu waimba kwaya, wakishuka wakipanga masika na hao ndugu hawachukui.
Lazima nikae na wewe kwa muda fulani. Nikusome, nikujue kindani sana.
Kuna uchunguzi inabidi ndugu yangu, kuna uchunguzi wa polisi na wa CID. Kama kuna mtu ambaye ana ujuzi wa hali ya juu ya kujifanya na kukusoma akili yako na kukufanya wewe uamini kile unachotaka kutoka kwake, ni mwanamke.
Beautiful, wonderful, glorious. We are having the show that we share entitled Shepherd Boys.
I'm waiting for you to get me to Kenya. That's what I'm waiting
for you.
God is the source of every blessings that flow into your life.
And I know that God is going to bless you and to do a new thing.
Pray, pray, pray. Pray.
Usiwahi cheza na mboga yangu. Na unafuata nani? Usisikuone ukinifuata. Nimekwambia una shares kwa hii kuku.
Look, man. Hebu kwanza rudi ndani ufresh hiyo choo, make sure umespray.
Juli, kwani wewe? Hii tumbo yako mimi najua inaweza ingiza kila kitu. Hata chuma nikishiaga nikupea, hata plastic najua utakula. Kwani leo kunaendaje? Kuna kitu sielewi.
Kabisa Mluya. Yaani umeamua kulala uchi?
Sasa kama hakuna ile nguo inanitosha, unataka nifanye aje?
Because you are fat.
Sasa ukiongelea mimi ati fat, na Julie tutasemaje?
Kuja.
Hi, and welcome to Tujenge Home. Your #1 show when it comes to all things architecture, real estate, property development, interior design. You get it right here on Tujenge Home. When the food is ready.
You want to serve them?
Dinner is served. Yeah. Let's go. Let's go.
Karibu sana mpenzi mtazamaji. Leo ninakualika kwenye mkahawa wa Epitome Zinc, Tsavo Road lililoko jijini Nairobi.
Ukiingia ndani utahudumia kwa haraka na chakula yetu ni moto. Chakula yetu, service yetu iko very excellent. Tumebebea.
Hapa kazi tu yo yo. Yeah, hapa kazi.
Mpenzi mtazamaji, na hakika kwamba wewe umekula kwa macho. Na hii ni hapa kazi tu.
A very good morning to you yet again here on the Morning Drift on Lookuptv. And of course, here we all know that today is Labor Day and the country is marking the day for the workers here in the country. And there will be celebrations at the Uhuru Gardens right here in the capital, Nairobi. We'll be bringing you those live images from the venue later on in this particular show. And I'm here to discuss, of course, the plight of workers and what they go through in their workplaces. But I'll not be doing this alone. I'm joined by GABRIEL NYAMU, who's an HR consultant. Thank you very much for joining us this morning, Mr. GABRIEL.
Thank you, Kitani.
Now, the workers do face a myriad of issues, and top among them, most of the time, the talk is surrounding the pay, the working conditions. But there's another very important aspect, and this is the aspect of mental health, because as we speak at the moment, many people are battling mental health. In fact, according to the statistics by the World Health Organization, 1 in every 8 people are battling mental disorders. In your own view, I want to pick your mind on this. What causes mental disorders in workplaces? Because there could be a lot of challenges. It could be balancing between life at work and at home. There could be a myriad of issues. What brings about the mental disorders or challenges at workplaces?
All right, thank you, Kitani. I think that conversation it's a sandwich of many components. At the work, we usually have 3 things. There is the work itself, that's the work that needs to be done. There is the workplace in which that work needs to be executed from, which means the office, the culture, and all that. And then there's the worker. So, and these 3 components need to be integrated for us to have an employee who is empowered, who is healthy, well being catered for. But at the same time, the employer also have expectations of what we call performance. Now, I think the statistics you've mentioned, actually, they are a bit more grave than that, because currently you're saying 1 on every 4 is predisposed to mental health conditions. Only that majority are not known at a very early stage. You just see some change in behaviors, but behind the scene, this person is actually mentally having a challenge. Causes are quite many, but I think I'll quote another statistics that probably may explain a little bit of the the real issue. There's a body called GARAP News, which is a global research organization that is quite authoritative. And for the last 10 years, I've been in the HR practice for more than 17 years. For the last 10 years, they have been consistently doing a survey in the marketplace, and they say 87% of the entire global workforce are disengaged. Meaning, they wake up every day, dress up like myself and yourself, and go to do things they hate. And I think I want to give that tangent there, that people are more pushed to the survival mode, meaning they do things that they hate, and therefore they don't find meaning on what they do on a daily basis. Now, if you wake up every day doing something you hate, just because you have to pay bills, survive, hustle, earn a living, what happens? Within a cycle of probably 1 year, you actually have already disconnected from that work. So before talking about other things like the employee environment and the work culture and many other things, already we have a bit of a challenge in terms of disengagement within the workplace, where people are really not aligned to what they're actually supposed to be getting: meaning, value, and also what we call purpose. They can't find meaning on what they do. And of course, automatically that pushes them to probably they're doing what we call side hustles. That's why we have people talking about side hustles, because they can't find joy on what they do. However, there is also the employer aspect, where you bring now the issues of like things like toxic culture and favorable working conditions, which maybe we are going to dissect a bit more further into this segment. So, but I think I will say it's a two-way thing. One, of course, people are misplaced. We all even know, even in our education system, there's also a problem, because sometimes people went to universities to do courses not because really they love them, but probably because there was a job they were looking for. And now later guys are looking at them and say, okay, I think I did this accounting, but I don't really feel joy or fulfillment in that accounting space. So what happens is, you might have good qualifications, but you don't get fulfillment on the work that you do. The aspect of pay are quite a little bit different. In fact, the surveys that we do quite often in the marketplace reveals that the greatest motivator for employees is not money. It's not actually money.
Interesting.
It's not money. It's actually the joy and the fulfillment on the work that they do. I'm sure you kind of get a bit of sense of fulfillment if something that you do have an impact and you can say, I'm proud I was part of it. Of course, you may expect commensurate compensation for that. So when actually you do surveys, you discover the non-monetary motivators actually are more than the monetary. So we have to look at it from a very wider scale of things than just maybe the pay, the benefits, and maybe those are things that of course are already structured. I know in the informal sector, or what we call the SME space also, sometimes some of those conditions are not clearly spelled out. There are people who don't have even things like medical covers, pension schemes, provident schemes, and many other such kind of benefits. But I think in well-structured organizations, that means the big organizations, you'll find, of course, this clarity around the benefits that any employee is entitled to. And they have a right actually to be able to enjoy those benefits.
No, talking about fulfillment, I'll tell you what, sometimes I wake up in the morning and I really look forward to coming to work because I really do love what I do. And to some point, I'd agree with you when you say the motivation sometimes is not about the money, it's about fulfillment. Now, if I can come to work today, I'm happy doing this work. Now, the surrounding environment of me working matters a lot. And I'd really want to know, as an HR consultant, what role do HR managers play in ensuring that their employees who are, battling mental health are well catered for?
Good. I think that's a very critical observation. There are three things that are a must-have within an organization, and HR professionals they make sure at least those things are well provided for, but not just providing, also the employee is empowered and they know and sensitized and aware of them. The first of course, is the physical working environment, because again, the physical interaction within the workplace, there are people, and I think there has been several cases even in the media, if you're working in a quarry where you have a risk of, something falling on you, definitely that's of course put your life at risk. So, and the law actually protect that. In fact, there are two statutory provisions or guided legislation around physical working environments. That's why you have things like WIBA, which is a Work Injury Benefit Associations, kind of authority, which of course provide that every employer should provide an environment such that if you sleep here on the floor and you get injured, you actually have a bit of a cover, which you call the WIBA benefit. This is what you call the Occupational Safety and Health Act, which also provide that you have some minimal basic equipment and infrastructure, things like the fire extinguishers, very basic things within the office and within the working environment, and it's an entitlement actually you have. So if your employer does not provide that, you have all the legal position actually to go and demand that to be provided for you, because your health comes first before the work. Safety comes first before the work. So if you're employed by an employer where you're supposed to have a life jacket, for example, and you don't have it, then of course that's an infringement of the law. If you're employed in a place, maybe in construction, and you don't have a helmet, that's a very basic provision in terms of equipment, the tools of work, all those are physical infrastructure. That's number one, the physical environment. You have to have the tools that you require to deliver. Number two, of course, is the terms of work. And I think this is where mostly you'll find now a bit of a challenge and some gaps in many organizations. The terms of work need to be spelled out upfront. That means when you're getting a contract or that appointment letter, when you get a new job, the HR has a responsibility to contract you and, you know, discuss and disclose upfront the terms of work, including now hours of work. Most, I think, we've been working within a 45 hours window within a week. If you're working more than 60 hours for those probably people who work night shift, you're actually entitled in law not to go beyond that. Recently, we have seen a new registration coming, the right to disconnect. Why? These devices that we're using are also becoming harmful because you're online 24/7. That means the employer has a temptation to even chat you on a Saturday and ask you, where is the report? Now, last year, I think it's not yet fully gazetted, but we have a new, actually, changing registration that it's called the right to disconnect, meaning you have your me moment that you can withdraw and say, I'm not available for work. And we are trying to say an employee has that empowerment. That is on the working conditions and what you call the terms of reference in terms of your work. That means hours of work, the number of hours you work, when you're entitled for overtime or not, and also, you know, things to do like absence or leave. And there are people where you find you're being forced to work like a donkey 24/7. The law actually clearly spelled out that you're entitled for leave, and there are minimum leave days that actually everybody should be entitled within one calendar year. That's the second component. The third one where now you might find again another huge gap is what we call the culture. I think the big talk in the city currently, in the town and in the workplace currently, is about toxic working environment. What that mostly points to is what you call culture. Now, the working culture is very key. There are places where people work like in a military, you know, you're in an organization, but your boss kind of treat you like a military. We all know the current generation that we have, which Generation Z, the millennial generation, they're not like the older generations where a boss speaks and somebody just, you know, obey. We are now looking for an environment where you actually model the right behaviors. I become the role model as a manager or as a leader in the organization, as a CEO or as a manager, as a director. I become the role model and I become a coach and a mentor to my employee, not the instruction of a military where I tell you, do this, do this, do this, without necessarily even understanding the environment. So the culture is a big contributor to actually mental health issue, because the culture may actually deny you even your basic human life sometimes, because there are even cases where there are organizations where you can't even give feedback, because when you give feedback, you are victimized. There are places where you can't tell the boss when the boss is wrong. And it doesn't mean because you're a manager, you are right all the times. And as HR, we are trying to create a very porous environment such that even the employee can challenge the boss. In fact, we are almost linking what we call management cadre, almost get away of it. Why do you need a manager, first of all? Because if the employee is empowered and the worker is empowered to work, why do you need somebody to supervise them? We are almost now trying to almost kind of get rid of that management hierarchy, because sometimes actually the contributor for employee disengagement. In fact, other research also show us for the last almost 2 decades, people don't resign organization. They resign who? They resign their bosses. So if you talk to people who are leaving and they resign, they'll tell you, I actually had an issue with my boss. There are more situations around that manager-employee relationship than actually the work itself. So culture is a big thing. And if the culture is not allowing you to be able to expedite yourself through your potential, there's cultures where there are things like abuse, sexual harassment that is around, and nobody, get accountable for it. The law have tried to protect us, because the even provision currently, if you have a certain number of employees in a company, you have actually to have a sexual harassment policy. Now, all those culture aspects can actually affect an employee, because you'll be working in an environment that is so toxic, you are abused, but because you have a pay and you have to earn your living, you kind of just persevere, which is wrong. In fact, we are encouraging people to come out. That's why there are things like whistleblowing policies, where can we whistleblow without being victimized, that you said something that is happening wrong within the organization.
Just to cut you short, I believe that is where the issue of job insecurity comes in. Many people are afraid, if I speak, I might be fired, so I better persevere. How do we deal with that?
I'll be a bit radical there, that there is nothing like called job security. It's just a concept. The same thing, even what you call work-life balance. It's really here, not there. Nowadays, we're no longer talking about work-life balance. We talk about work-life integration. It's how you integrate all that, because you have to breathe as you reason, as you see at the same time. I mean, this, you can't say I'm switching off. It's quite a very thin line. So we talk about integration. Talk about job security. Really, I don't think there's something like that, because one, the workplace is so disrupted currently. We have what we call new competencies, new skill set demanded in the workplace. So you can't just say, I'm relying on the degree I did 10 years ago, and you still use that degree 10 years ago, that's when you graduated, and you rely on it to say, I'm still relevant today. So I want to actually kind of clear out misconception. There's really nothing like job insecurity. I'm in consultancy. We go through restructuring. You find a company laying off employees. And they're happening right center. During COVID, many organizations discovered the skill set they require to operate and succeed. They need actually to kind of weed out some old competencies that were required before and introduce new competencies. So the only security that we have is that for those employees who have what you call lifelong adaptive learning, meaning what you learned last year is last year. You have to keep learning every day. That's the only time you can say you have a bit of a relevance, even if the workplace has been disrupted. But for those who hold on to the old skill set, maybe you did a qualification there before and you still think it's relevant today, no. I'll give you some statistics and some trends happening currently. Initially, to work as a developer in some of these big tech companies, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Facebook actually, you had to have a degree in computer science and software engineer. Do you know currently what they're doing? They're saying you don't need a degree. Large part of the development workforce, what we call software engineers in some of these big tech, actually have no degree. They only have a 6-month short compressed course in software development, and they get those jobs. But if you are there with a degree or even a master's and thinking that is what will give you job security, I don't think that's the right thing. So I would surely say there's no job security per se, because the workplace is kind of being disrupted. What I would encourage is that, of course, for employees, they have a role to play, meaning they keep updating themselves in terms of their skill sets so that they kind of maintain relevance. We have actually currently a pivotal shift towards from the formal 24/7, 8-to-5 job engagement to what you call the gig economy. In fact, where we are moving to now, we are likely to have what you call more gig economy, where people work for few hours in a day. You come and work here for 3-4 hours. You go and work for another employer between 11 and 2, and in the afternoon you're working for a third employer. That's happening in the West, in the Western world, where I'm not tied to one employer. And we are hoping that, of course, even legally, we are going to start accommodating that. But that's what's happening currently, because you'll find you may not necessarily have to work between 8 and 5. really in that confine of work because you have maybe more potential that you could be serving elsewhere. So I need you for 2 hours only. I hire for 2 hours, I pay you for 2 hours, and you move on to another employer. We're expecting that disruption to happen even locally. I know there are some companies that have already started emblazing the gig economy, where they are saying we want 40% of our workers not to be tied to a full-time job. They only come and work on demand. I know we are yet to have legal provisions to control that environment. So job security, I would say, is something that is quite a very gray area, and I don't want, unless in the government where you're employed and you have to retire up to 60 years. So as long as you're performing, then of course you may say you have a job security, but it's not something that really we advocate for currently.
Now, talking about job security, you've also spoken about the safety of workers, that is physically and also mentally.
Exactly.
And just want to give you some statistics here, because according to the ILO, that is the International Labour Organization, Occupational Safety and Health Convention, that is number 155, and of course the recommendation number 164, provides a legal framework to protect the health and safety of workers. However, the World Health Organization Mental Health Atlas found that only 35% of countries reported to having national programs for work-related mental health promotion. 35 is even below half.
Yes.
What is the stumbling block here? Why do most of the countries lack the programs to help employees who are battling mental issues?
I would say it's a global issue first. One, this mental health conversation is kind of a very recent conversation. It used to be there, but in a different manifestation. Even as a government, it's only until I think 2018, 2019 that the government actually have set up a task force to deal with the mental health. So you can see we are very young, and therefore in terms of operationalizing mental health in the workplace, it's kind of a long journey. We just have only started the first maybe layer of the implementation, even understanding, sensitizing people. There's even still some trauma around it, because would you want to kind of go and tell somebody you have a mental health issue? Or would you even, how would you feel if somebody tells you you have a mental health issue? Okay? You can see even the stigma that it has there. So we have a long way to go. I can say it's something that is at a very early stage, and therefore I'm not shocked about the statistics, because only those who at early adoption, and most of them you'll find they are a bit more mature organizations that are well established, that have the right infrastructure even to be able to do that. So one, I would say, first of all, to the employee side, even to have them have good, environment where they can come and tell HR, I am battling with this. I'll give you a case in my own personal case study, and this is a real situation of a company that I was consulting for, and there's a lady who used to report a bit late in the morning. And when she was reporting in the morning, therefore her performance was kind of deteriorating, and she was almost to be fired by the employer. But just before firing, because she was put in performance improvement plan, and then after that, there's a legal process to be able to release somebody out of performance. But the employer decided, no, wait, let's just do a bit of counseling. So they sent the employee to a counseling. So the counselor actually discovered this employee have a mental health issue. And because of that, even her brain is kind of damaged in a certain way that it takes her almost 3 to 4 hours in the morning to fully function. You know that you open your gadget, your device, a tablet or a laptop, and it takes like 4 hours to actually get into a state that it can function. So the employee is not performing because she has a condition, but she never disclosed to the employer she has a condition that disturbs her productivity in the morning. And the employer was almost firing this employee. But when she went to the counselor actually discovered there's an issue here. It takes her almost 3-4 hours before even her brain fully get activated to work. And therefore, between 8 up to around 10, the employee is not working. She's just there physically. Now, what did the employee, what did the counselor do? The counselor said, this employee is quite a brilliant lady. So let's change just have a certain discretional shift of her working schedule. Instead of her reporting at 8, allow her to come at 10. What's wrong with that? And she was given a kind of a flex hours, where instead of, others are coming at 8, the employee come at 10. By just changing that shift between now, instead of working at 8, come from 10, and then maybe stretch up to around 6, the employee actually was among the top performing employee of the year within the next 1 year. What I wanted to say is that the adoption of the mental health adjustment or support system, it's at a very early stage. This is the time even we are sensitizing. There was no budgetary allocation even from the government itself 5 years ago. It just started from 2018, 2019. It's when we started now a new task force that have been funded. In fact, the first time even I think to have like a budget allocation for mental health advocacy is just less than 4 years ago. So we still have a long way to go. On the employer side, of course, we are also trying to adapt what we call the well-being programs. There are some companies that have what we call a wellness program. Now we are shifting from wellness to what we call well-being, where we say we want the employee as a whole. Meaning, we want even to contribute to the factors that affect you at home. That is your wife, your spouse, your children, where you stay. Because now it's no longer beyond just, I am contract Kitani. It's beyond that, because you can be affected in terms of productivity by factors that are beyond, you know, the work engagement. Those are things that in terms of where you're staying, the environment you stay at home, in terms of your relationships, that's your family and no others, that can affect the work. So we actually are coming up with some innovative ways of how to actually have an integrated well-being, because when I hire you, I'm not just hiring Kitani, I'm hiring the whole ecosystem around you. So employers are going beyond just the normal transactional engagement, which is just a mere contract, and then push you towards productivity. So I say, statistics, yes, as they are reading, it's around a third adoption, but we're at a very early stage. That's why there's a huge advocacy work happening in the marketplace currently to sensitize HR, sensitize employers to start accommodating this as a critical component of the employee issues. So I expect, I'm very hopeful that maybe within the next 4 or 5 years, we are going to have a bit more higher adoption of wellness program within the workplace.
You've talked about, the committee or the commission on working on matters of mental health in the country, not being formed like close to 4 years ago. In your opinion, do you feel like we've made progress, or do we need to fast track? Because as we speak, you'd hear of people taking their own lives because of battling mental health, and you've also talked about stigma. It is very, very difficult for someone to come out and talk about it. How do we deal with that, and what do you think the government can do to really fast track to ensure that we can be able to tackle these issues fully as soon as possible? Because the more time it takes, the more people we might end up losing who are battling mental health.
Sure. I want to appreciate the government at least is taking some steps, because the situation was more grave there before. In fact, if I'm not, I may have forgotten the statistics. When there was a study done around the health facilities nationwide, if I remember well, but I may need to check that, I think it's only around 17% of typical healthcare facilities had a dedicated wing to deal with mental health issue. We all know, even here in Kenya, I think we only knew of 1, 2, 3 hospitals. We know them that were more dedicated for healthcare, in terms of mental health related issues. So even the infrastructure itself, it's only recently now we are seeing, between level 4 and level 5 hospitals and level 6, at least now there's a certain push that they have to have even trained workers. So if you have mental health condition and you get into a kind of the hospital, who do you see? Is the person you're likely to see they're able to actually attend you and diagnose you have a mental health? I'll take you through a process, the tri-aging process, even in the hospital itself. So I wanted to say, the infrastructure component of the government is still a bit weak. I think we have less than 40% of all our healthcare facilities able to deal with mental health situation. That means if I am in HR as an employer, where do I refer these people to if at all we don't have those infrastructure? So it takes a collaborative approach between the government side and also the employer side. So the government has its all to play, even including early stage detections, kind of support structures that people can attend, things like counseling, some programs that can help a worker at a very early stage, not when somebody now is a bit on a chronic state where now it's even kind of a clinical situation. Because these things can start way early. And you can rehabilitate people a bit way early into the process. From the employer side, I would say we need, of course, now to start strengthening our institutional framework, Meaning even in HR currently, we have even dedicated HR professionals that are more specialized within employee well-being programs. They're able to detect change in behavior, and instead of just firing somebody or giving them warning letter and taking them through disciplinary process, first of all, you try to diagnose why is the employer behavior have changed maybe in the last 6 months.
Gabriel, let's just pause on that because we'll come back and talk about, the termination process of workers. Is it done according to the law? But right now we want to cross to Uhuru Gardens, where our very own Brian Amwai is standing by to let us know what is happening at the moment. Brian, if you can hear me, what is the situation like at Uhuru Gardens? Are people turning out to, mark the Labor Day here in the country? Who are just some of the leaders who already streamed into the venue? Brian. Well, we do have some technical hitch somewhere, but talking about termination, sometimes you hear of employees complaining about how they've been declared redundant, and what does the law stipulate in terms of termination of contract? Because in some organizations, you just personally I've heard of cases. I had a friend of mine who works somewhere in Eldoret, and just came to work one morning. He was told, "You're dismissed. We no longer, need your services here." What does the law stipulate, and what is the right procedure or criteria to dismiss an employee?
Thank you. There are many ways, terms of employment can come to an end. There is the discretional, and there is the voluntary side, and there is an involuntary. Okay, maybe we'll talk about the involuntary, where it's either a case of termination or a case of maybe dismissal. The law has very clear guidance around the same. If there was a gross misconduct, what does the employer have to do? You have first of all to kind of make it aware to the employee first on the offense that they have committed. So I cannot just wake up and say, "Kitoni, from today you are not in job, you have no job." No, that is illegal actually. So first of all, you just to be able to institute a process where you have to actually tell the employee, make them know what the offense is. And with that, then you can also commission an investigation. If at all it's an issue, maybe there was a fraud, or somebody has stolen money, or you have damaged some property, or you have insubordination issues, there has to be some investigation and evidence to prove that. And what will happen is that then you are summoned formally, literally. I know this may not happen so much in the SME space, where even employment is done by the word of mouth. That's where the problem is. So you have actually to summon the employee, and they have the right to show cause and express themselves and say, "Yeah, you told me I abused. I didn't abuse. This was the position." And we call that hearing, disciplinary hearing. So after the disciplinary hearing, if at all there's evidence that of course the employee is in the wrong, you give them a warning letter. And there's first warning letter, there's a second warning letter. The third part, or the third repeat of the offense, the law gives the employer a right to terminate that contract. So there's a process there. So you have to give them a show cause to explain yourself. There's a first warning letter, there's a second warning letter. Now, if of course you're going to the third level, definitely it means that this is persistent, and then you cannot be tolerated, then you have to exit. There's also the angle of performance. Because when you're employed, you're given a job description, and there are appraisals that you do. Also, the law gives you a kind of an exit plan if at all these performance issues, means within your jurisdiction. Which,
just hold on to that note, because I'm informed we do have Brian Amwai. Brian, what is the situation at Uhuru Gardens? We do know that this is President Dr. William Ruto's first Labor Day after he took over reins of power. You kindly bring us up to speed with what is happening at the Uhuru Gardens, Brian.
All right, now we are coming live to you from Uhuru Gardens here in Nairobi, marking the 58th Labor Day celebrations. And just the theme of this particular event is Kenya Workers for Economic Growth and Job Creation. We do understand that some of the people that will be addressing this particular event are President William Ruto, also Secretary General Francis will also be making his way here later on. Now, as I believe my camera person can actually show you and pan around just to show you that people are already streaming in, try to make settle down before the event officially starts. Those are just people who have made it already here, despite the weather. They're making sure that they actually come to this particular event. A lot of this is expected to happen. This being the first Labor Day for the Kenya Kwanza government, and coming in the wake of the high cost of living, we've seen a lot of protests and a lot of Kenyans calling on the government to actually reduce the cost of living. A lot of issues are expected to be addressed, with the theme being, Kenya workers for economic growth and job creation. Data from the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics at this particular moment shows that the unemployment rate, or rather 2.9 million Kenyans right now, are not employed. So we do understand and expect that the president will be looking at that and also addressing these particular issues. Apart from that, there's some of the issues that the Kenya County Workers Union has actually raised in regards to these particular celebrations and some of the things that they want the president to be looking at, and we will just be following to make sure that, or rather to assess whether he'll be actually addressing that to their satisfaction or not. I just want to take you through some of these particular issues. They say a lot of questions have been raised as this in the culmination of this particular day, and they said the satisfaction of workers in areas of discrimination, there's threats of cybercrime and also artificial intelligence, decent work, low wages. This has been an issue whereby we've seen different workers from different particular sectors calling on the government to actually look into that particular issue. Right now we do understand that the minimum wage actually stands at about 16,000 Kenya shillings. This was actually announced in the last Labor Day celebrations with the former president Uhuru Kenyatta. We also expect President William Ruto to actually be looking at this particular issue. Kenya Union of County Workers also raised an important point where they say there's political interference when it comes to matters, workers and contracts and employments in that particular regard, whereby they feel like politicians and also just the political space is interfering with that particular sector when it comes to employment and a little bit of discrimination. And they want the role of the Salaries and Remuneration Commission to actually be looked at, because they feel like there's a little bit of unfairness in regards to that. They've also accused of usurpation of functions of the National Public Service Commission and the NSSF. And also something important to be actually focused on is the introduction of the pension of the house levy, rather, the 3% that will be deducted from workers in who are public servants, or rather. And this is something that I was speaking to one of the county workers, and they were saying it is something that has been objected. We did see yesterday actually Teacher Service Commission, the US Executive Branch actually looking into that and saying they'll not want that to be effected, because the amount that is going to be deducted does not match the salary that they are getting in regards to that. So a lot of issues are expected to be addressed, a lot of expectations from workers in general. Just want, they want the president to be looking into that particular issues, and we hope that at the end of the day, their issues would have been addressed, and they'll be, moving out of this particular place feeling like, most of their concerns have actually been looked at. And also, maybe just if you give me a second, just talk to some of these people that are addressing this particular event to just tell us exactly what their expectations are. Kindly, if you just talk to me. How are you?
Very fine, sir.
What is your name?
My name is Benson Ndambuki.
Ndambuki. Yeah. What are your expectations today?
Mimi ni kiongozi wa chama cha kutetea maslahi ya walimu cha NAT, tawi la Makueni County. Na tumekuja hapa Uhuru Gardens. Our expectations as workers and particularly teachers ni kwamba tumeahidiwa CBA. Last time kulikuwa na monetary CBA, lakini sasa tunatarajia viongozi wetu na rais mwenyewe kama atakuja hapa atangaze at least a boom for the teachers so that hata sisi kama wafanyikazi and laborers of this nation tupate hiyo jambo.
Alright sir, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Alright. Si leo sina time saizi. Tutaongea baadaye. Sawa, shukran. Alright, those are just some of the concerns. Those are teachers just like you had, and we do believe that maybe some of the concerns that they have will be addressed as we continue with this function today. Back to you in studio.
Well, thank you very much, Brian and White, for that particular update. Remember, we'll be bringing you more updates as our flyby and the celebrations to mark Labor Day here in the country, where we do get to celebrate and, of course, understand and try to get measures in place, or proper measures in place, to at least ensure that the working environment and the plight of workers in the country, well, you know, laid out and solved by the government. You know, they always talk about on top of the list is always the pay rise and the percentage in terms of pay rise to workers in the country, the minimum wage bill. We'll be looking forward to hear from President Dr. William Ruto on the same. Right before we spoke to Branham, we did listen to Branham. You were talking about termination.
Yeah, exactly. So I talked about one side of termination, which is maybe as a result of disciplinary process, because an employer also may do may commit some offenses that of course will violate the contractual obligations. But there's also a second one where it's about performance, because you are hired to come and deliver some deliverables in terms of your work engagement. That's why you have a job description, and the employer should articulate to you way upfront in terms of the job expectations, and then give you the enabling tools. If you don't perform, there's that other second way of exit, where then the employer will give you a performance improvement plan. Mostly the role requires you be given like a 3 months, and another 3 months, and the 3 months you're given clear deliverable. If it's in sale and you're told you need to hit a certain target, then in 3 months we review on a monthly basis. If it doesn't meet, then of course can extend to another 3 months. If at all purely you cannot deliver your job, through that process, you can actually be exited. But you can see it's a very clear process. It's not something that you wake up every day and then you're told there's no job. However, there's also instances where you find companies are doing restructuring, and the legal requirement, of course, is that the employer can terminate a contract, but of course have to pay you. Okay? So if I find the company is no longer able to sustain the cost, and that, again, because the company has its own interest, and the law protects both the employer and also the employee, because again, the employer is paid in money, and they can reach a place where you can't sustain the payroll. And therefore, if the business is affected in terms of performance, there are sometimes a case where you can go through a process called redundancy, which is a legal process also, because you have first of all to give the intent of doing the redundancy or restructuring to the government, give a notice, and then undertake the process. You have to prove, is it that maybe you have automated the process? Is it that maybe your business processes have changed in terms of maybe something that you're doing manually now is no longer there? Or probably there are new competencies that has come and the current workforce don't have those competencies. There is also a very clear process around how you do those restructuring and then how you declare redundancy. You can also give people a chance, which is purely discretional by the employer, because the employer also can give a voluntary exit and say, anybody who wants to leave within the next 3 months, we are going to give you a package just to lay off and being able to be left with people or head count that we can be able to manage in terms of sustain based on cost. So all those has clear processes. So the extent where you wake up one day and somebody just come and you find a letter, when you're coming to the door, actually even you find your thumbprints cannot log you in, unless there are criminal issues where maybe you have committed criminal issues. Of course, you give you what you call, you kind of told then go suspension. You can be suspended temporarily to allow investigation. That is very normal. That's okay. But it's not an exit. It's not a termination. It's not a dismissal. We can kind of tell you, don't come. We want to investigate you. That's very okay. But then, of course, within a certain period of time of that reprimand, then there has to be evidence, disciplinary hearing. Then, of course, if you are found that you committed that gross misconduct, the employer can be able to terminate that contract. So I can say in all phases, the employee is protected literally. I know there are some employers where they don't have strength in terms of strong structures that we're able to implement in the law. And also, where if at all you are hired in a very informal way, where it's a word of mouth, you find also there's a temptation where the boss might also fire you with a word of mouth, which is wrong. Because contract is not just the written contract. It's what you call implied contract. So if I give you a responsibility, and if I didn't give you a letter, by the fact that, of course, you showed up for work, you also deserve professionalism when it comes to exit and how I handle you and how I manage you. So I know there are those who probably don't have HR, especially the SMEs. You'll find in an SME, the founder of that business is also the HR, is also the finance, is everything. You may find such lacks, especially in such kind of establishments. But ideally, the role is very clear in terms of the process for termination.
Now, we are talking about mental health. And according to the Employment Act here in the country, each employee is supposed to work 52 hours a week and entitled to, that is section 28, I believe, entitled to 21 days annual leave. How crucial are those days in terms of, increasing productivity? Because if at all maybe I'm not, I do work extra hours, or I'm not entitled to leave days, it means to some point my productivity will be a bit low.
Yeah.
And talking about productivity and mental health, it is estimated that at least $1 trillion is lost per year due to mental health issues.
Yes, agree. Again, the aspect of taking a break, because we are not robots, human beings requires rest. It's actually also again provisioned in law in terms of the number of days, a minimum at least number of days somebody should take in a year to just go and rest and freshen up and come back when you're kind of freshened up and you're able to reset and come back and become more productive. I would say that break is very healthy, but how you manage the break is the issue. And that's why now even the new law that has been created, which is still in the process, is to allow employees the right to disconnect. Because you can go on leave, but the employer can still be calling you, say, where is this report, where is this document? Just because maybe the way you work, there's no proper handovers when you're going on leave. In fact, most of the organizations actually try to enforce that when you go on leave, you should actually not be seen anywhere opening your email. Stop, hand it over to somebody else. So for where we have well-managed HR structures, you'll find they will let you go if you're taking your 14 days to spend with your family and just go and get rejuvenated. You actually completely disconnect from the organization. But I know of many organizations again where, maybe because of the constraint of the workforce and the resourcing, where even when you leave, you are not on leave literally. You only that maybe you are not in the office. You find you're still receiving phone calls. Customers are calling you. You're being asked for reports. You're being asked for, memos and some policies and whatever. That means you're not taking a break.
Just before we continue as well, there's the aspect of, maybe I'm taking my 2 days off or my 14 days leave, but still, because of the tough economic times, maybe for example here in the country, you have to go and find some extra work, some side hustle to work.
Yes.
How crucial is that?
No, I think that the reason why people go and get that extra thing support now the earlier proposition I had raised, that 87% of the entire workforce are disengaged. That means they wake up and do things they hate, but they have to do it because of what? Survival and in a living. Because people who are well placed and they are doing and discharging their purpose, they can find meaning in what they do. When they take a break, they take a break. But if at all what you do on a daily basis, that's regular work, is really not something within your life purpose, you'll find you have to supplement it or substitute it with something else that you have to do, which then actually give you mental fatigue. Because it's kind of your working machine 24/7, 52 weeks in a year. And I think that's not sustainable. So ideally, when you take a break, this also calls for your personal discipline now. This is beyond the employer. You have to take a personal discipline such that I'm taking leave literally. When you take leave, meaning disconnect even from any work-related engagement. And mostly you'll be able to talk to your manager before you take leave and say, I'm taking my break. And you plan for it. You don't just wake up one day and say, I'm going on leave. No. In fact, research have proven those small breaks sometimes disrupt your break, because you then don't take a certain solid long break where now you can actually literally rejuvenate yourself. If for some companies, they will tell you have to take at least 2 uninterrupted weeks. So you have the 21 days minimum, which is the total annual entitlement. But when you're told, take 14 complete. And within those 14, we should not even see you in the office. That's the best idea. And even you now, when you take that break, are you really taking leave, or you're going again to go inside the hustle? I don't think, for me, I don't advocate where you take leave from one employer, then the next day you're in another hustling, because you don't take a break at all. Taking a break means, of course, disconnect. Even sometimes even digital breaks where there's digital fatigue. Take a break, disconnect from your phone, disconnect from social media for a while. That's the way. In fact, when you're doing the employee well-being programs, we advocate even for the social media, because one of the contributors currently for social health issues and mental health issues is actually the social media here, the digital. Because there's immense pressure and attention, call for attention. You find a new SMS coming, you want to read. You find a new pop-up on your Facebook icon, you want to see those new notifications. That's a big issue. So it may actually not just work-related mental health issues, even the nature of work currently, because now we are a global community. Whatever is happening in Ukraine is affecting you here. You're building up some emotional reactions based on the things that you're hearing in Maridi. Okay, it may have nothing to do with the work itself, because you are surrounded as an ecosystem with so many, feeds of news, of information, of update, viral content going, and all that is coming to the same brain. You still have the same brain, the same psyche, the same emotions. So you may find somebody having mental health may not necessarily be experienced just because of the work. So I'll say, when you take leave, we also need to train our people and our employees. Leave means leave. Take a break. It has a way of, currently there are companies that are exercising what you call mindfulness program. It's a component of meditation, where take a break, take restful exercises, go and just being able to meditate deeply, because that helps in terms of rejuvenate your body and your strength and your concentration, the brain power also get revived. So I think it's a collaborative approach between actually an employer and employee. In my view, you usually call it more of an impact partnership, where the employer may provide for you all the benefits, tell you have 30 days leave. But if you yourself as an employee also are not intentional, it won't benefit you. So it has to take 2 ways. The personal accountability and personal responsibility from the employee side, but the employer, of course, provide that everywhere. Where if you take break, let's not follow you with a phone call asking where the report is. I think that's not healthy. And I support that bill that is being propagated for currently. I think it started from October last year. I know it's still in the discussion to amend such that employees are entitled to what you call the right for disconnected. So you can disconnect from the workplace temporarily until when you're back, or even during the work hours alone. Because we may think the working hours is just when you show up 8 to 5. But if at all you're being followed up to do something at 8 p.m., you're still extending the work hours, and there's no overtime. Okay, so I think that is going to help us to maintain a bit more healthy working, enhanced well-being for employees if they can actually be able to disconnect. But then what they do privately also matters, because they might disconnect from work, but also they are still engaged in other things. Even social media actually is a lot of work to concentrate in social media.
Well, Gabriel, even as we wrap this conversation up, from where you sit, you've talked about incorporating, mental health into the company culture as one of the, ways to tackle mental health issues at, the workplace. From where you sit, what else can be done? Because the cases of mental health keep rising each and every day, and at least 60% of the world's population, are working. What else can be done?
I think all different stakeholders, we need to approach this from a very holistic approach. So all stakeholders need to be partners in this process. Meaning, like there's the employer side, there's the government side, which of course government needs to provide infrastructure, and where we need legal registration and where we need legal guidelines, of course, provide that's the government side. But I think I will go to the space that personally I have. This is my own personal opinion. For me, the greatest contributor is what you call misplacement. We need to make sure that people are placed in their lines of strength, and where you actually are supposed to also have a win-win situation where I am not just coming to work for money, I'm not coming to work because I have to survive, but I'm partnering with you as my employer to actually execute my purpose. In fact, I'll tell you globally right now, what is trending, especially in the higher C-level, we call them C-level, the boardrooms, is how to pivot from profit-led organization to something we call purpose-led organization. So if there's a great shift I will advocate for today myself, is shifting from profit-led, where it's all about money, 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 and you can do anything just to sacrifice people, even health, for money. We are moving from profit-led organization to what you call purpose-led organization. Within a purpose-led culture, people work for value, people work for meaning. In fact, they work for impact. But out of that, money is generated, profit is generated. So we have a long way to go. I sit in many boardrooms where organizations are struggling to actually stay on foot because they have pushed people for money, for money, for money, for money, bring more sales and all that, cost cutting and all that. And actually they have discovered it's not working, it's not sustainable. But where you just shift the gear and say, why are we in business? Why are we in employment? Why are we doing this business? So when you focus on the why, you find actually you have more answers than focusing on just pushing people for transactional engagement like profit, making sales, marketing, and all that. And if you find, and maybe for those who may go and try to study this, I talk about this a lot, you find even companies now trying to come up with a new function called Chief Purpose Officer, where they are saying, hey, for impact and sustainability, we need to mainstream our purpose to question why do we exist. Why do we exist as a media house? Why do we exist as a bank? Why do we exist as a manufacturing company? When you're able to answer that, you'll find it's beyond monetary. So organizations must find something beyond monetary. So beyond the balance sheet, beyond the profit and loss account, because that's what has been driving organization in the past. If you focus on something beyond that, you have more sustainability and also what you call impact. So I would say for me that's the biggest issue, because that's how people then align themselves on their line of strength. So can I hire you to do something that you're not just being paid for it, you actually find your personal fulfillment in it, in doing it. With that, there will be a best of both. And I foresee if that is done, you'll find the issue of mental health are going to kind of go down. So as long as we are still having misplaced, disengaged workforce, the mental health is still going to continue being a pandemic.
Well, want us to continue more, but of course we'll come back again to discuss, maybe what the government needs to do, the Ministry of, Labor and Social Protection in conjunction with the Ministry of Health to ensuring that, at least workers in the country do work under the right conditions and what measures need to be put in place to battle cases of mental health. But for now, we taking a short breather, but Simba Charles Salaza Kiage will be here with Mr. Mwashere to, help you understand where do we draw the line on matters, labor laws in the country, and of course, many more on that, even as we mark Labor Day here in the country. So don't go away. We'll be back in a moment.
Karibu sana mpenzi mtazamaji. Leo ninakualika kwenye mkahawa wa Epitome Zinc, Tsavo Road lililoko jijini Nairobi.
Ukiingia ndani utahudumia kwa haraka na chakula yetu ni moto. Chakula yetu, service yetu iko very excellent. Tumebebea.
Hapa kazi tu yo yo. Yeah, hapa kazi.
Mpenzi mtazamaji, na hakika kwamba wewe umekula kwa macho. Na hii ni hapa kazi tu.
A man, a symbol of strength, power, and leadership. What does it take for a man to meet society expectations of provision and leadership?
Lazima uwe mtu wa bidii, lazima ukija kuwa lazima uwe ni provider, wewe ndio unatoa kila kitu.
In our weekly episode of Born a Man.
Kusurvive kwa shule ilikuwa ni noma. Yeah, getting something to eat, bado especially in my last 2 years ilikuwa ngumu sana.
Moving from State House Road to Kahawa Ndani, where they came back to be hosted.
We embark on telling stories of what it takes to become a man in today's society, like it has never been told before.
I know men, we are cowards. Because tunaambiwa watu kufa kimwanaume, that's nonsense.
This is the life over man.
Utachagua sura au tabia unapotaka kumchumbia mwanamke?
Anaweza kuwa mrembo lakini hana tabia.
Naweza jifanya ndio hata kama hapa sitapata, nipate kwa tabia.
Ukweli wa mambo ni kwamba wanaume wengi, hata wale ambao wanatutazama wakati huu, ni sura inawavutia mara ya kwanza.
Ukiona mwanaume anasema ule dem ako poa, ule dem, hafikirii future na huyo dem. Huyu mwenye ako poa anapendeza, anakaa vizuri,
acha kutudanganya.
Wajua waweza kuwa na tabia nzuri lakini ikabadilishwa na hali. Kanisani wanja ndugu yangu waimba kwaya, wakishuka wakipanga masika na hao ndugu hawachukui.
Lazima nikae na wewe kwa muda fulani. Nikusome, nikujue kindani sana.
Kuna uchunguzi wa aina mbili ndugu yangu, kuna uchunguzi wa polisi na wa CID. Kama kuna mtu ambaye ana ujuzi wa hali ya juu ya kujifanya na kukusoma akili yako na kukufanya wewe uamini kile unachotaka kutoka kwake, ni mwanamke.
Hi, and welcome to Tujenge Home. Your #1 show when it comes to all things architecture, real estate, property development, interior design. You get it right here on Tujenge Home. When the food is ready.
You want to serve them?
Dinner is served. Yeah. Let's go. Let's go.
Usiwahi cheza na mboga yangu. Na unafuata nani? Usisikuone ukinifuata. Nimekwambia una shares kwa hii kuku.
You got the roof, man. Hebu kwanza rudi ndani ufresh hiyo choo na make sure umespray.
Juli, kwani wewe hii tumbo yako mimi najua inaweza ingiza kila kitu. Hata chuma nikishiaga nikupea hata plastic najua utakula. Kwani leo kunaendaje? Kuna kitu sielewi.
Kabisa Mluya. Yaani umeamua kulala uchi?
Sasa kama hakuna ile nguo inanitosha unataka nifanye aje?
Because you are fat.
Sasa ukiongelea mimi ati fat, na Julie tutasemaje?
Kuja.
Karibu sana mpenzi mtazamaji. Leo ninakualika kwenye mkahawa wa Epitome Zinc, Tsavo Road lililoko jijini Nairobi.
Ukiingia ndani utahudumia kwa haraka na chakula yetu ni moto. Chakula yetu, service yetu iko very excellent. Tumebebea.
Hapa kazi tu yo. Yeah. Hapa kazi.
Mpenzi mtazamaji, na hakika kwamba wewe umekula kwa macho.
Hapa kazi.
Na hii ni hapa kazi tu.
Beautiful, wonderful, glorious. We are having the show that we share entitled Shepherd Voice.
I'm waiting for you to get me to Kenya. That's what I'm waiting
for you.
God is the source of every blessings that flow into your life.
And I know that God is going to bless you and to do a new thing.
Pray.
Michezo na wachezaji, matukio na matokeo uwanjani. Tumejifunga kibwebwe kukuletea mbwembwe,
si mazungumzo ya kusisimua. Ndiyo maana safu ya spoti ipo hapa kwa ajili yako.
ZFC! ZFC!
Nami hapa nahodha Robert Chacha, si suisui, na kuandalia kipindi bomba cha safu ya spoti kila siku ya Jumamosi kuanzia saa 7:30 ndani ya runinga nambari 1 ya michezo Lookuptv.
All right, welcome back to the morning drifts. We are still, I was almost saying we're still pushing the wheel, but then morning was still there. Anyway, we're still on it. It is 1st of May 2023, and you don't know exactly what happens on the 1st of May. It is Labor Day. And we're on the ground right there at Uhuru Gardens, where the ceremony that is going to be graced by the president himself, President Dr. William Ruto, is just about to kick off. Just what we saw earlier with Ian Ketani, our reporter. That is, wow, it's a good morning. His name is getting Branamwai. All right, giving us details on exactly what is happening on the ground. We shall be visiting him from time to time within our broadcast here, just to be in touch with exactly what is happening on the ground. And by the way, you can be part and parcel of this broadcast right here at Lookuptv across all your social media platforms. The hashtag is The Morning Drift, and you can get in touch with me directly at Kiage Simba. We're still back with our Masharia now to talk about what rights that you, as an employee, you should be aware of at your workplace, and also look at other affairs then in the country in as far as the Labor Department is concerned. Now, here's the thing. If you look at the 2021 numbers, and these are the numbers that are coming from the Labor Department, you will see that 18.3 million people were employed in Kenya. This was an increase of over 900,000 individuals from the previous year. Now, the employees belonged mostly to the informal sector, where roughly 15.3 million worked in informal conditions, where 3.1 million were employed in the formal sector. That is a snapshot of exactly where we are in those employment numbers. And if you look at the cohorts in terms of those populations where you find heavy employment and heavy unemployment, it is essentially among the youth as well. We'll be talking about that as well within this particular space. Now, Mashari, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing
good.
Good.
Welcome back again. We're still here together.
Thank you.
Now, let's look at this day in an entirety. I'm going to look at employee rights and exactly what is open in this space. But there's one thing that I want us to start attacking this conversation from. The Standard ran a story this morning on employee satisfaction. That 60% of those who are employed in Kenya, they feel like they are underemployed. Meaning, you're not getting paid for what your true output essentially is. Let's attack it from that direction. What is my right as an employee when it comes to negotiating for my salary, that's remuneration, and making sure that indeed whatever it is I'm doing is what I'm getting paid for?
Thank you so much for that question. And it's a very packed question. Understanding as well is that employment engagement is a contract.
Yeah.
And we have two types of contract when it comes to employment. One, we have contract of service, and then we have contract for service. Before I even discuss further what those contracts entails, you understand employment is a market. We call it labor market. In labor market, we have the employers, we have the agents, we have the employees, we have the government.
Yes.
And we have other external factors that affect the object labor. Labor is a commodity that is intangible. It's a service you offer. It's labor. Now, when it comes to remuneration, it is tied to the terms of engagement.
Yes.
At times, not once, not twice. Somebody properly qualified in a particular field, they may find themselves working in a different field. It is not surprising you can find a graduate chauffeuring people in a PSV being a driver. It's not surprising.
It happens in this country, isn't it?
It's not surprising that you find a graduate with a master's with so many degrees is hawking items in our market. It's not surprising. And not once as well, we have seen people go out in the street with their certificates saying, I'm looking for work. So before we even discuss the issue of remuneration, we have to discuss it from the understanding that the demands in the labor market do not meet the supply in the labor market. The supply of the labor market are usually and most often greater than the demands. If, for example, in this broadcast, you want to employ a broadcaster and you open a platform, over 500 people are going to apply. Even when you quote the amount you're paying, people may not concentrate on what they need to be paid, but they want the job. So notwithstanding what they feel they ought to be paid, they will accept the job. When they accept, they enter into a contract. When a contract is entered, as are the terms of the contract, that is what will bind the parties.
Yes.
And when we are discussing about the contract, there is the presumptions that there is a consensus ad idem. Consensus at the inception of the agreement, the contract. So if you are qualified, you are a graduate, and you think you should pay a minimum of 100,000, but as per the contract that we have agreed, I'm paying you 50,000 shillings, and you have signed because of maybe various factors. You have signed. That is what I'm going to pay you. So the issue of payment is a very thorny issue when it comes to employment, because at times the employees agree to be paid terms that do not resonate to their qualifications because of either poverty, lack of job, and other factors that are pressing upon them. And lack of, at times, the employer is so impulsive on the employees that they cannot even negotiate a good time for themselves.
Yes.
So that affects the subject of pay. And then the government is a bit hesitant, or sometimes they try in a particular profession to establish the minimum pay, because that is the market. In every market, people are open to trade. You know, service, I said, is an item of trade. The job that you do for 200 shillings, there is somebody who will do it for 1,000 shillings. and there is no question about it. It's an item of trade. But then for us to fully understand what should compensate the pay, when we look back, and the reason why we commemorate this day, it started in 1886, 1884, 1890, where employees came together and they wanted to champion for 8 hours work. You see, when employees feel they are working more than they are getting, then the only way avenue, they reduce the amount of work hours they are spending at work, so that maybe they can go and look for another work.
True.
That push has by and time been recognized internationally by International Labour Organization, locally, and also at the national level. The Employment Act, which is by and large the act that governs the employer-employee relationship, recognizes as such there should be a commemorate pay for the work done.
Yes.
But it doesn't quote 50 shillings for 1 hour. It's a commemorate pay for the work done. So in terms of the pay, the basic pay that one should receive, that should form the basis for engagement.
Is that when you look at this number, that 60% of the employed in the country feel like they are underemployed, does that open a conversation probably to an abuse of employee rights somewhere heavily in this country, or it is essentially what is in existence in this country? Case in point, Mr. Macharia, we've even seen where bigger companies in this country, case in point, Apple, they've been blamed for manufacturing their phones in China because they don't know that in China, when we come to minimum pay, you're going to employ more people, you're going to pay less to produce the same product that would have produced at probably twice the cost in the United States, because their labor rights and labor relations when it comes to government, they're well protected. When 60% of us are complaining that, well, we are underemployed, does it open a conversation to probably this government is not so sincere about employee rights in this country?
We talked about the contract of service, the contract for service. Mm-hmm. The employees or the person engaged in those services, as we said, in the inception, yes, they agree to it. So what may bring the employee dissatisfaction, we also need to understand that in the employment, we have the employees in the private sector and you have employees in the public sector. The employees in the public sector, they are employed by the government. Employees in the private sector are employed by you and me. So when you're talking about employees' dissatisfaction, there are various avenues to look at it. One, either they are underpaid. Two, the working environment is toxic to them.
Yes.
And three, their voice is never heard. Because what brings dissatisfaction is if your pleas are not listened to and they are not acted upon. So before, we need to understand how is the employment environment.
Yes.
And environment encompasses so many things, including the leave that my colleagues talked about, how people are treated. You know, at times when we discuss about the issue of employment, it is not just about you working and getting paid. It is deep to the bottom point of the human dignity. You may pay someone 1 million, but how you are treating them, it is not in line with the human dignity. And even if you're paying them much and you ask them whether they are satisfied or not, they'll be dissatisfied. So dissatisfaction is not only because people are underpaid. It may also be as a result of how they are being treated as human beings. You know, one of the things that has brought so many problems in the labor market is commodification of labor. That, you know, labor cannot be commodified. You cannot say your work is worth this much. As much as somebody earns a salary as a result of their service, you cannot say that is exchanging the service in terms of the monetary compensation. Commodification of labor leads to misuse and leads to mistreatment and leads to downgrade in terms of the personal approach and treatment of the employees. You see, employees beaten for them to work or to work hard. That does not respect their dignity.
That's it.
So when you're talking about the employees' dissatisfaction, it is beyond the government doing or not doing.
Yes. Let me point you out to something that just we do learn now. You see, what the government can do in that scenario, Macharia, is even say the minimum pay in this country. Essentially, they set it at 7,000 in the country. That's what they can start doing. And that means then it's my right as an employee to go in court and say that this guy right here, I've done a job, all right, for a month, and he's paid me 6,000 shillings. But the government does say that the minimum pay is 7,000. It doesn't mean that then that the government is not doing much. They are doing something about it. Could you talk to me about the implication of the government trying to fight for the rights of the employees? Let's say, begin from that point where you're saying, well, in this country, if you're going to employ somebody, whether you're in the formal or informal sector, minimum pay, it's 7,000. You've got to start from there.
You see, it's one thing to have laws.
Yes.
It's another thing to implement them. And as I said, employment is a contract. The government can say that the minimum wage is this. But then the employee who needs money and who needs employment is in so much dire of money that they are not even so much interested in what the government is saying.
But who's to blame in that scenario, Mr. Macharia? Is the government or the employee?
What I think is, as much as we are saying the government can set minimum limits as to what should be in the employment, the people also needs to be educated, because when the government says that you should pay at least 7,000, we agree. You know, an agreement is a contract. We agreed, I'm going to pay you 5,000. You've agreed. But then your agreement it is beyond what the other external factor may say.
Which is okay, but then any contract that you're going to write as an employer in this country should conform to the laws of the land, that you can't pay somebody 7,000. So that's why I'm asking the same question as well. Is the government not policing this enough to the point that majority of the people, and when we're saying 60%, you like to think that this is heavily in the informal sector where majority of the employment is, that they are not satisfied, they're getting underemployed, meaning that somebody somewhere is not policing these employment laws just as they should, which is the government and the Labor Department. We have not seen so many cases of employers who are in court for underpayment in this country. I've not seen a case like that.
You know, I think it's so difficult. It's very difficult to have fruits of that law 100%. And I tell you why. We have various classes of employees. Now, when you say minimum pay be 7,000, who are you targeting? Now, when you are looking at the class of employees, there are some who are on full employment. There are some who are on part-time employment. There are some who are on contract. There are some who are on temporary employment. There are some who are in the informal sector. Now, when you say minimum labor is 7,000, who is your target employee? Somebody somebody comes to you, and I want you to contextualize this. In your house, in your compound, you want somebody to do the trimming and the gardening. You meet them, you agree, I'm going to give you 200. I'm going to give you 5,000. I'm going to give you 2 shillings. And they agree. You know, that is employment. Employment is not really when you are in a suit, in a tie, in your car going to work. Employment is as basic as that. And every time we make laws, thinking employment is something very formal, we miss the point.
Yes. Just hold on to that thought, Macharia. I'm going to pick it up. By the way, just on your screen right now, you can actually see that indeed we do have Musalia Mudavadi, that's the Prime CS, has already arrived at Uhuru Gardens. We do have the Deputy President, who's also arrived. We do have Nairobi Governor Johnson Sakaja, who's also right there. So whatever it is that we're waiting for right now, at any minute, is for the president to arrive in, which would then mean we'll be crossing live to that particular ground. But just before then we do that, we still on this particular topic for essentially why most of the employees are dissatisfied that they are underemployed. Macharia, you're at the point where it is very hard to police even a minimum payment in this country.
It's very difficult.
Yes.
Because who is your intended beneficiary of that? And I said, you know, majority of Kenyans, they are in informal employment. You know, I did a research on this in my undergraduate, and I saw majority of them, or majority of employees, they are in the informal employment. These are people who the informal sector is largely dominated by. There are no written contracts per se. There are no the issue of leave, whatnot.
Yes.
There is no basically agreement on the basic pay.
Yes.
There is no adherence to the procedures of hiring and firing. These are people who, by themselves, they are not interested in those things.
Yeah.
Or when you look at the informal employment, it seems like to shun the formality. And you know, the formality, including having minimum pay.
Yes.
It sometimes makes the employers even to be reluctant about that form of engagement.
Acharya, just I want us to look into these issues even before we cross live to Uhuru Gardens any minute now.
Yes.
Why are we saying it's very hard when indeed we can even ask the Labor Department in this country to make sure that all this work is structured? We can pay per hour, we can pay per week, we can pay per month. So that if any other person walks outside here today, Mr. Macharia, and says, these are the rates for plumbing per hour, for plumbing per week, for husbandry, maybe for 1 month. Why are we saying it's hard when we haven't really tried it as a country?
You know why it is hard?
Yes.
I want to give you an analogy. Today you want to go and buy some fruits. Somebody is selling same fruits in the same table.
Yes.
He's selling 100, he's selling 50 bob. Which ones will you pick?
Definitely 50 shillings. Yeah.
That's what happens. When I am giving work,
yes,
you come, you say, for me, I can only work for 50,000. Somebody comes, I can work for 10. I can work for 5. I want work done. Who do you think I will pay the work? So the employees themselves are not keen to enforce the rights that accrue to them.
Yes.
So that if I refuse on the basis that the government said I should be paid 7,000, I'll tell you, fine, just go and wait for that work. Somebody else comes and I tell them, this is the work I want done and I have 5,000 shillings. I will do it. They'll do and take the money. So that which you want to champion as an employee, the other employee is helping to infringe. And the understanding is these people, they are coming from, assuming somebody from slums.
Actually, Mr. Macharia, but I've got to pick your sentiments as well. What we're seeing right there on your screen as well is now the president arriving, meaning that any time from now we shall be crossing over to Huru Gardens just to get his views on this particular day. Remember, it is his first since he stepped into office, and there have been a lot of conversations around the cost of living, and that we do expect is going to top his agenda, which is exactly what I want to put to you just as we rush through this. Himself, what would you expect the president to speak about today around this issue, by the way, which is facing the cost of living? Himself now has introduced, or there is already proposals then to increase NSSF deductions. There's a 3% deduction again that's going to come again on the housing pillar as well, meaning that these guys who are dissatisfied, Macharia, are still going to see major of their paycheck again run away from them when they're facing this high cost of living. What would you like for him to address? Number one, top of his agenda, and number two, what is your feeling on these NSSF deductions and these affordable housing deductions as well?
I would wish to hear the president address the issue of unemployment.
Yes.
I remember in one of his agendas that he is going to tackle the issue of college transition, which really affects the rate of unemployment by the graduates. I wish to hear what are the framework that his government has in place to ensure that they have tackled the issue of unemployment.
Yes.
Two, I would wish to hear on how the framework on the deductions is going to be made. One thing we know, and for sure, you know, an employee, the deductions are good if they are well utilized.
Yes.
But one thing is key. You cannot deduct employees' salary without informing them. It is unlawful.
Yes.
So you need to engage them and you tell them, except statutory deductions, any other deduction that is there ought not to be deducted unless that employee is informed.
Yes.
So of course there need to be a discussion on how to proceed with these deductions. They cannot be unilateral decisions to deduct employees' pay.
Yes.
And of course I expect him to speak about the cost of living, because the cost of living, whether we like it or not, it is tied to employment. It is tied to salary. That is the bottom line. So if the cost of living is to be favorable to the employees, for them to afford that which is costly, their pay need to be increased. For them to afford that which they need to have the capacity to afford it. The capacity is money. So how is the government planning to proceed with the issue of payment, employment and payment? So the government can come up with policy on the employment. Mm-hmm. Like the previous government had how they could employ vijana to clear the streets. That's and they will get something. Yeah. So this government also needs to come out so that if the government needs to further have more deductions from the employees, they plan on how to increase their pay. They plan on how to make the employment environment more conducive for them.
That's it.
So that they are not disgruntled even when their salary is being deducted.
Pretty much.
And also the government to come up with how are they going to address the issue of the corruption and the management, stewardship of the people getting their money. That is key.
Pretty much. Macharia, I would have liked to weigh in on other issues as well, but we are informed that the event is actually just starting. Right now, we want to hand over then to the team that is on the ground at the Huru Gardens. Macharia, thank you very much for coming by, man. It's been a pleasure. And for the entire Morning Drift team, we want to say thank you very much for being a part and parcel of this program all the way from 7 a.m. this morning. Now, we give it over to the next team. We're going to take you towards the end of this day. For me and the entire of the morning team, that is Morning Drift, we'll see you tomorrow again. Good morning and good day as well.
zetu, na vile vile wewe ndiwe ujuaye nia zetu. Tunakuomba utuepushe na shari, na chuki, na utuepushe na fitna za ijalie asubuhi yetu iwe yenye nuru. Tunakuomba na ujalie mchana yetu kila siku iwe ni yenye furaha, na ujalie jioni zetu ziwe ni zenye kheri. Tunakushukuru ewe Mola wetu kwa kuitikia dua zetu ya kuiombea nchi yetu mvua. Tujalie iwe ni mvua yenye baraka na neema, na wala usitujalie iwe ni mvua ya karaha, majuto na maafa. Wewe ndiye mwenye kuzijua shida zetu, na wewe ndiye mwenye unaweza zifahamu nia zetu. Tujalie wepesi katika maisha zetu, na kila zito ulifanye sahali. Tujalie kuishi kwa amani na furaha, na utupe mafanikio na ustawi wa kiuchumi. Ya Allah, tunakuomba utuhesabu katika wale waliokuumba ukawapa. Utuhesabu katika waliokuomba ukawapa. Utuhesabu katika walioitaka neema yako ukawaneemesha. Na pia tunakuomba utuweke miongoni mwa waliokutegemea ukawatosheleza. Ya Allah, tunamuombea rais wetu Daktari William Samoei Ruto pamoja na viongozi wetu wote. Ewe Mwenyezi Mungu, muongezee busara katika kazi yake, muongezee subra, muongezee hekima, na vile vile muongeze uwezo katika utendaji wa kazi zake. Tunakuomba ya Allah, uwalinde na uwabariki wafanyakazi wote katika taifa hili wanaojitolea kwa bidii kila siku. Uzibariki riziki zao za halali na uwalipe kwa jasho zao, ewe Mwenyezi Mungu. Ewe Allah, kama taifa na kama nchi, tunakuomba kwamba popote pale penye kasoro au popote pale katika mapungufu ndani ya mienendo zetu, tunakuomba ewe Mwenyezi Mungu utusamee. Amin. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammadin nabiyil ummi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Amin.
Watu wote tuwe chonjo, tuweze kuomba wakati wa Labor Day, tukiungana na taifa yote duniani. Na yetu leo tunaomba tukiangazia amani ambayo nataka iendelee katika nchi yetu, ikiongozwa na rais wetu His Excellency Dr. Samoei Ruto. Na tuombe, tufunge macho sote. Baba mtakatifu, katika jina la mwanao Yesu Kristo, twaja mbele zako wakati tukitoa shukurani katika nchi hii, tukiwa zote kutana wakati wa Labor Day ambaye ni siku inasherekewa kote duniani. Na Baba, tunaomba wakati wa sherehe ya Labor Day, Bwana, tukiombea wafanyikazi wote wawe ni watu wa amani na kutangaza amani, ndio business zote siwe zinaendelea vizuri. Hatutaki maandamano tena kuona katika nchi hii. Tukisungumuza leo na tukiomba katika Labor Day, tunasaidia amani yako yaendelee, na mambo ya mapambano barabarani kuharibu business za watu wakiwa na sherehe sio na maana, tunaikataa katika jina la Yesu. Neema yako Baba na itoshe. Bwana, nakushukuru Bwana siku ya Labor Day, kuendelee na kutubariki. Na wakati tunatoa shukurani kwa ajili ya kiongozi wetu His Excellency William Samoei Ruto na naibu wake Rigathi Gachagua, His Excellency, tukiwaombea waendelee vile wanaendelea kukaza mwendo na amani. Bwana, tuliomba wakati huo, na isipokuwa tulitoa kura, lakini wewe ulichagua Ruto kuwa kiongozi. Na siku vile mambo yale yamefanya kwa miezi 7, akiongoza miaka 5 au 10, atapindua Kenya hiyo. Umulinde His Excellency, Bwana umulinde kabisa maisha yake, umpatie nguvu kabisa kuanzia siku ya Labor Day Mwokozi ya leo hai. Wafanyikazi wote wasimama pamoja naye, na neema yako Baba iwe pamoja nao kwa kila wakati wote. Tunaomba Bwana mambo ya upinzani ukome. Tunamwombea hata Honorable Raila Odinga aweze kuzeeka akiwa na amani. Wakati uko naye ni wa retirement, aritaya na amani, na tunamwombea amani. Mambo ya maandamano barabarani ya wachane naye, apumzike kwa amani. Kazi hii ulipatia His Excellency Samuel Ruto, ndio ulipatia kazi yaendelee, na hatutaki kuona malumbano hapa hata pale. Kuanzia siku ya Labor Day ni siku ya kishujaa katika nchi yetu, na utaona mambo ya ajabu ikiendelea. Na kushukuru Bwana kwa ajili ya wafanyikazi wao, na waombea walinde na wabariki, na neema yako na itoshe, mfalme wa falme. Naja mbele zako wakati huu pia nikitoa shukurani kwa ajili ya katibu mkuu wa KOTU Francis Otuori, ambaye tumemwombea miaka nyingi, na taona hekima ile ulimpatia Baba inaendelea na kuinua Labor Day, inaendelea na kuinua watu wote wa Labor, wanaendelea vizuri na amani. Na kuomba waendelee na kumpatia nguvu, naye aje kumalia seka kwa amani, kwa sababu miaka hii yote ameweka mfano mwema Francis Otuori. Asante Bwana kwa kaunti zote 40. Tunaomba wakati wa Labor Day amani ianze katika Nairobi kwa gavana wetu His Excellency Johnston Sakaja. Amani ianze Nairobi na isambae kote katika kaunti zote katika Kenya. Hatutaki kuona malumbano ya siasa hata kidogo kuanzia leo. Leo ni siku ya kihistoria, na Bwana Mungu bariki nchi na